First of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. We put a lot of work into this, so it means a lot. And thank you to the judges for taking time out of your day. Good afternoon. My name is Kate Cole, and my thesis topic is Should Kids Be Introduced to Technology at a Young Age? And I will now be presenting my thesis abstract. Technology. It's impacting the world every day in some new form, and children will be introduced to it no matter what. Should they be introduced to it from their toddler years, or should they be introduced to it later in life? Digital technology has many effects on children, including it affects the child's brain development, it substitutes human interactions, and it causes attention issues. The first issue being it changes the brain development. The way the kid processes information, they begin to scroll over the information instead of actually reading it and processing it. By being on technology, even throughout the day for long amounts of time, it also causes the child not to be able to get enough sleep, which causes the brain to not be recharged, which then causes the kid to be tired throughout the day. The second issue is it causes them to not have human interactions. If you see a child playing on a tablet, a phone, a computer, anything like that, they're not having any interactions with people in front of them. They're specifically focused on the screen. And children need the relationships, and they need to have human interactions at a young age so that they can develop into people and socially. I can't give words. Anyways. And also, the last is it causes attention issues, which can affect their school and can affect their jobs and many things later in life. So, in conclusion, kids should not be introduced to technology at a young age because of the effect it has on the development of the child. Thank you. I now stand ready for questions.
Thank you very much. Just to start, I would say you clearly did a lot of research. I'd say that's a huge strength in all of your thesis. When I met you earlier, you talked about how much work you put in your introduction, thanking us, but man, you clearly have done a lot of work, so I commend you on that. There's a ton of evidence of that, so well done. Being prepared, doing the work is the hard part, and then you get to reap the benefits of, look, I have this to present now. I've come to a landing point. So that leads to my first question. Just as I read through, your thesis question was technology, what age should you begin? And I never did hear quite the actual answer to that, so just what would you say is the age to begin?
So much research has shown that kids should not be introduced to technology until at least 2 years of age, so no technology whatsoever. So I would say 2 years would be the age that you could start introducing it to the child.
And then would you kind of slowly introduce more after that, or is it just full immersion?
I would say start off small, like don't just like throw it all at them, kind of maybe let them watch TV, and then maybe later on, introduce them to electronics, but definitely don't throw it all of them at them all at once because that's a lot for a child to process.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And then just in all of your study, how has this actually impacted you the most?
Okay, so I love children. I'm very passionate about them, and we live in a very technological age now. So I think the most interesting thing for me was really the brain development and how it does affect the child and how it does affect the human interactions later on in life. I think that was really interesting to just kind of see how it really does rewire the brain and see how they do process information and how the beauty of now memorizing things has turned into just Googling it. So I think that was something I really learned and I'll take on with me later in life.
Kate, so excited. Great paper. And I will tell you that as much as I deal on some regularity with the issues of abortion or gun control and all that, or a number of other very controversial topics, every day, without exception, every day, this is put in front of me by some parent. What do I do? What do I do? Should I let them or shouldn't I let them? And they're 13, they're 19, they're 12, they're 2. When do I start? So this particular topic for me is a constant, unrelenting engagement every day. And then I have 8 kids, 7 of whom are teenagers, And so this is not only an out there pastoral topic, it's a me in my home going, what do I do? At the same time. So I love that you did the research on this. And I've also done a ton of research on this particular topic, so that's slightly disadvantaged to you because I actually know this really, really well. But it leads me to a couple questions. First of all, same question I asked the other two. Why this topic? Why did you pick this besides your love for children? Because I do know you love kids, but why this topic? What drew you to go, I want to write a paper about technology and when you should start using it? What would you say?
Okay, so like I said, I do love kids. I babysit a lot of kids, and I've noticed that there are kids that I babysit that their parents do not let them watch TV. They don't let them play on electronics. It's just they play with toys and they play with each other. There's no electronics. And then I have another family that all it is electronics. Their 2-year-old plays on an iPad, and he, has temper tantrums when they take it away. And so kind of going into this, I was like, what do I want to write my thesis on? And I was like, it would be really interesting to see how technology does affect a kid and what age you should begin, because I see so many kids just going in the grocery where they're just like glued to their iPads or glued to their mom's phones and stuff like that. So I think it was a very social topic that I kind of noticed just in my everyday life, and I decided that I wanted to do some more research to kind of figure out where I stand with that.
Great. Then in your research, okay, so again, you kind of went into this like some of the others did with already some ideas of what you knew would be true. I mean, I doubt you went into this thinking the answer is going to be give them their first smartphone at 6 months old. Like you already had an idea, like it's probably not going to be super early. What were maybe 1 or 2 things that you discovered in your research that you legitimately were like very surprised by, now you know, and you had no idea? And it can be on either side, either, wow, I had no idea it was this bad, or, oh, I would have thought not to do that, but it turns out that's okay. Where have you learned? What are the big surprises in your research?
There was some research I did, and it talked about how in the 1970s, kids didn't watch TV until they were 4 years old, and now kids are watching TV at 4 months old, and I think that really surprised me because that's a very, very young age. That's not even before they're a year old, and they can't even talk at that age, so I think that really surprised me. And I also think just the kids being on their, like the technology at such a young age and it having an impact on them and then being, per se, addicted to technology at such a young age. Those are like the 2 things that most shocked me.
Okay, great. You just said a word that leads me to another question. I'd love for you to unpack for me just a little bit this word addicted, right? So you've used it a couple of times now. It's also kind of finds its way into your research. We know what addiction means, obviously. I'm addicted to drugs or alcohol or whatever. Now we're saying addicted to technology.
Yeah.
Would you unpack for me just a little bit, not so much just what you wrote in the paper, but what your understanding is? Again, you bump into a person, whether they're a young adult or maybe a mom or dad, and you say to them, just be really careful, your kids could get addicted to technology, and they go, what does that even mean? Like they don't eat it, and they, what does that mean? I'm addicted to technology. What has the research showed you it means? And how would I identify, I think my kid is addicted, or this adult is addicted to technology?
Yes, I can understand that. So when we hear addicted, I feel like sometimes it does have to do with like drugs and stuff like that. But by being addicted, it's almost like you can't live without it. Now, obviously, a child can live without a phone, a child can live without a tablet, but them wanting to be on it at all times, wanting to have it with them, finding it as a, per se, comfort. So let's say, your kid has an iPad and you go to take it away and they're yanking it back and they're having a temper tantrum. That's the point where I would say your child is definitely addicted to it, when there has become a point where they don't want to give it up and they want it because they're so used to it. There's a quote by Chris Anderson that he said, on the scale between candy and crack cocaine, it's closer to crack cocaine, which that is another thing that actually completely shocked me, because I knew that it was an addictive device, but for them to say it's closer to crack cocaine because of the video content and the images and the games that these kids play, it definitely surprised me. But I would say that when your child doesn't want to give it up and when they always want to be on it and are constantly consumed by it, that's when I would start to say that your child is addicted to their cell phone or tablet.
Great. So, considering all of this stuff that you've researched and you now know, Kevin kind of asked the question, what is the age that you would say? And you sort of said, well, 2, and then upwards from there. I'm gonna ask the same question, but I'm gonna ask for a little bit more of a detailed structure now, right? So you've done this research, and I say to you as a parent, okay, I'm gonna have a child born, and I'm gonna raise them until they're, say, 18 or 19, right? And then beyond that, kind of like, I don't know, parent them but differently. Give me the sequence in your mind. Again, I've done the research now. I'm asking for your suggestion. Suggest to me the sequence of technological introductions to my child. And thinking about the way your paper was written, you had several categories in there of what technology is. So there's the broader technology, but then there's everything from television to the smartphone. So try to break down for me in kind of a quick little answer the different pieces of what technology is, which should be introduced when, in your general sense, and kind of why. Why wait or why now?
Okay,
Yeah.
so for me, I mean, personally, I think 2 is even too young. That's just my opinion. I would even wait maybe until the child is like 4, and then they can start watching television as the first thing, because that's kind of what everyone watches. It's just a thing. You watch a movie with your family or watch a TV series with your kids. So that's the first thing I would suggest. Maybe when they're like 8, let them play on a tablet. And then the phone it's so hard because you're giving your child a thing they can call, I mean, unless you take that off of it. And it's a lot of responsibility. I got my phone at 12. I wish I'd waited a little bit longer because that's a lot of responsibility to put on a 12-year-old. So I would even maybe say like 13, 14, because they're getting into high school. And then that's when you can start introducing the phone to them. And then from there on, I mean, it just varies. Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question. Can you just add to that answer then, that sequence I get, give me a quick version of your why. Why 4 years old would you say? Why then kind of tablet at 8 or 9? And specifically, not just your opinion now, but from the research you've done, what occurs that you remember that around 4, it's probably not a bad idea, but before that, this or around. Give me the why from your research on all of that.
Okay, so I don't have, like, I have research. I don't have a lot about, like, the certain ages. But for me, 4, I work with younger kids, and 4-year-olds kind of begin to start understanding, like, how everything works, and they start, you know, having more conversations. Not that they don't talk before that, but I work with them, and I kind of notice that they talk more and kind of start understanding. So I feel like that's a good time to introduce them to TV because they can kind of understand it. From there, it gets tricky because I didn't really do much research on the teenage years, which I wish I had, but I did not. But I would say 8, you know, you're in like 3rd grade-ish, and I feel like that, you know, you can start playing on tablets and games. And then 13 or 14, I would say, because you're getting into high school, and that's a lot of responsibility, and then you can be introduced to that, but not while you're still in elementary school because of just personal responsibilities and the child's development.
Great. I have one more, I have a lot more questions, but one more before I pass it on, and then I'll come back to some other questions that are, this question. So we talked a lot about some of the dangers of technology and introducing the technology because it could be dangerous in the development, etc. of the child. What would you say, now let's flip the coin for a second. Man, technology, it's not evil. It is very helpful. So I'm making a statement now. That statement may or may not be true. So I'm kind of making that statement to say, technology, very helpful. Either answer, yes it can be, here's how, here's why we should even introduce it, or no it's not. Actually, if you could hide your child in a cave somewhere and avoid this altogether, you'd be much better off. In other words, what makes technology a win? If there is even a win, and why is it an advantage?
Yes, I can see that. So throughout my paper, I don't want anyone to think that I'm just like butchering technology and saying like never introduce it, because obviously that's not going to happen, and it's not going to benefit your child if they're just hidden off and they don't know anything about the world. I would say there are many benefits to technology. Some kids learn differently, so that can definitely be a benefit with school and learning, and they can play different games or they can watch an educational video. I would also say, I'm trying to think, yeah, it's beneficial towards that, and you know, they can also see the news so that they are involved in the world, and they can have communication. Maybe if there's a cousin in a different state, they can also have communication. So there are definitely many benefits, just not introducing it to a child at such a young age is what I would say to that.
All right, thank you. Good answer.
Very good. done lots of research, and you're obviously very confident, and you know a lot of what you're talking about, and you're just very composed. And so I'm going to take a different approach than what's been asked so far. For you personally, you've mentioned addiction, you mentioned all of these things with technology. What has been your experience with technology?
Man, I knew that would come. So I can't exactly remember the first time that I really watched TV per se. I remember my mom knows, I watched Noggin when I was really young. It was like an educational TV program. Well, what age did I start?
It was before 2.
So it's definitely been different for me, and I've talked to my mom about this. I actually, from there on, I just watched TV. I'd never really had like an iPad. I had an iPad about at maybe age 8, but it really wasn't mine. It was kind of the family iPad. And then at age 12, I actually got a phone. There is a reason behind it though. My mom worked at a different school that was really far from me, and my dad also traveled a lot. So it was for safety reasons, but I do wish I had waited a little bit longer because it did kind of affect the responsibility, and it can become like you want it all the time and you want to be on it. So that's really been my experience with technology and being introduced to it.
I have one more question about that. So, do you guys have a TV?
We do.
I asked that only because you made a comment about not introducing 4-year-olds to TV, or not introducing them to TV until they're 4. And I think that's a great idea. But most people have TVs, a lot of people do, and when you have TV, whether you have cable or whatever, a lot of times you get home, at least this was the experience for me growing up in my family, you get home and the TV automatically goes on. So if there's little kids in the house, how do we monitor that? How do you go about handling not introducing them to TV if the stereotypical ways they just turn on?
Okay. So I knew that question would come up because I knew saying that it's like, oh, but I watch TV with my family, and I don't want to just put the child in their room and be like, go to bed. What I mean by introducing TV to the kids is really, it's fine if they're with a family, but I mean not letting them watch insane amounts, either by themselves or with their siblings all the time, and having interactions with them and still playing. Obviously, it can't be, turn off the TV and nobody watches it, but it's more just about a balance between it and not just letting them watch it constantly, but maybe playing with them, and they can obviously still be there, but it's more just about balance and not letting them just watch it by themselves in the morning or at night.
That's good, thank you. And one of the things I think that you've talked about a lot of good things, and so you take a step back, away from your paper, not necessarily dealing with the exact content in which you've written on. I want you to think critically for a minute about how do you think we've gotten to this place, right? Obviously there's been this really big technological advancement, but what are some of the things that you can think of? Why is it now such a big deal that we have to even write this paper?
Why is it a big deal that kids are being introduced to technology?
So let me rephrase it, sorry. What things have kind of happened that you can maybe just think about that has gotten our culture to this place where technology is such a problem?
Can you kind of rephrase that? Because I think I know are you asking how kids have been introduced to it, or are you asking how we've made technological advances?
And so a little bit of both. It's kind of a vague question, and it's not necessarily from what you're doing.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I know it's a little tricky, but I guess just thinking about it from what you know of your growing up, and maybe pre-you, right? Just kind of a little bit of history. What can you just assess? Some big things that have happened maybe that have brought us to the place where technology is just taken.
Well, I can't remember everything exactly, but when the phone came out and you could carry it around, that was a big thing. Even way before you could just carry it around on a smartphone. When you had the what is it? I don't even know what it's called because I didn't use it. Or the phone booths where you had to pay a quarter to call someone, and I can't remember everything exactly, but I feel each year it's progressed, And now it's not even technically progressing, it's just the phones are getting bigger or either smaller. So now like with iPhones, they just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now the iPads have somehow shrunk. I don't know how that happened. But I think we've gotten to this point because also with, aside from my research, with kids being introduced to technology and it just being a normal thing in our everyday lives, people are busy. Technology is all around. It's on billboards, it's in the car, it's on your phones, it's at gas stations, it's everywhere. It's unavoidable. And I feel like it just seems like a normal thing since we're all around it to just give it to your kid and just the advances that we've made throughout the years to get us to the point where we are. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Thank you for answering that. And I know that's a hard question, and you might be like, why did you even ask that? The reason is because I think you're at a really good place. You've done a lot of research. You're very comfortable. You have a very clear paper and things that you're arguing. And I just asked that because I think that you could really not only take this paper, but your future research to a whole other level if you just ask that question. And I know there's limitations on like page numbers and things like that, but as you research either further in this topic or future topics that you research if you go to college or whatever you do, ask the question, how has historically this developed? How have we got to this place? Because we were born at a certain time. We only have a certain experience from the time that we're born, and there's a whole lot of life before us that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And so researching and getting an idea for history and how things have developed really can help shape and bring wholeness to the research that you've done and can really add a nice element to your argument. And so as you consider more research in different areas or furthering this, I think that it could really just take you to a high level of academic just research and scholarship if you incorporate that element. So.
Yes, thank you so much. That's a really good suggestion.
Yeah, this is a hard space for some of us at this table and around here because you're saying these things about like, that I don't remember what that phone was called back in the day. And I'm like, if I were doing a senior thesis, there's no way I'd write a paper like this because it didn't exist. Like literally technological addictions weren't even a thing, and we couldn't carry a phone around, and I never used a phone because it's amazing how quickly things have changed. And as things have changed so quickly, and we are here now, so now from a parenting perspective, we have a completely different ballgame playing with our children. I would just also encourage you, as you've already been, like this is a reality that is emerging in a really, really big way, and I think we haven't even begun to see the wave of damage that's coming from this. And so I would really, really just encourage you, because this is an area of passion for you, but particularly kids are an area of passion for you. Dig into this one even more than you have. Make this more than a paper cake, for real, because there's so much behind what you've put here that you haven't yet even tapped into, and you weren't supposed to for this paper, so that's good. But man, you are on the edge of a giant mountain of things to climb, and so dig in. As you consider that, as you look at the research here, have you done any research, and I know it's not so much in the paper as much because you deal more with brain development and so on in here and early age childhood, but have you done much research in the area of emotional impact on technology, especially on preteens and teens? In other words, the rise of depression and so on. And if you have, what have you found in that and what has struck you about that?
Unfortunately, I have not. I wanted to. It's just there was a page limit, and I was trying to make sure I had my thought process clearly. So unfortunately, I don't. But I have seen it, and I haven't had personal experience, but I have seen it with friends. So I would definitely say that yes, there is an emotional development that does impact teens with anxiety and depression and comparing themselves to people that perceive themselves differently on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat, and it definitely is affecting. So I think that also comes from, maybe being introduced to it young or being on it too much or being addicted. That's what I would say to that.
Awesome. And I was just more curious whether you've done any research, because sometimes when we're running a paper, we're doing broad research, and then we're narrowing it for the paper, and I wasn't sure how broad you had tapped into your research. Also, on that same note, not so much necessarily from a research perspective, but in your encounters in the studies, especially of early childhood development, what did you find in the impact of technology on early childhood and brain development? What would you say is the most negative thing you found in terms of what introducing technology too early to a child would affect? What would you personally say from my research, this is the most dangerous, the most negative reality?
I would say the biggest thing is really how it rewires the brain and the brain processes information differently. There was research that I did in my paper, and it talks about how kids begin to scan the information instead of actually reading and processing it. So I thought that was really kind of interesting because, you know, they're not actually understanding it. They're just scanning it and then they're putting on the next thing because of the way that they're reading technology, and the images are coming up so quickly and the videos are coming up so fast. So I think that was definitely one of the biggest impacts I found, apart from, of course, sleep and,
Sure.
you know.
But that's the big one for you.
That is, yes.
And I would tell you, I agree that that's an extremely big one. So let me ask you this, now it's critical thinking. We're stepping out of your paper into that. So a child's brain rewires, because of technology, to scan information instead of processing information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that that's happening. What do you think are the implications of that to that child as they grow into adolescence and then adulthood? In other words, okay, so our brain scans information out instead of processing it. What's the big deal? So somebody says to you, what's the big deal? That's a good evolution for humankind. What's the big deal? What do you say? Here's the big deal.
The big deal for me is by scanning it, is your brain really processing it? Is it really soaking it in? I would personally say no to that because I know that sometimes I've read through something and I have scanned it and my mom's asked me about it and I've been like, I don't remember that. And then I've also read something and really thought about it, and then I have remembered it. So by scanning, you're not really remembering the information, you're just putting it in your brain for a few seconds, and then it's gone. And that would be the big deal for me about just reading and actually processing the information and understanding it so that you can further your job or education.
Okay, good. So memory, you're suggesting then that memory is something we're kind of learning to skip over. And we're just kind of collecting information and letting it run through instead of storing information, right? So if we are not remembering things anymore, what kind of an impact do you think that's going to have as we enter adulthood?
I mean, there are so many things that it could impact, from, you know, maybe not remembering that maybe you had like a job assignment and your boss asked you about it and not necessarily you forgot to do it, but you don't remember exactly what it was about. It can affect history itself, not remembering maybe what happened so many years ago. It can affect your education if you can't remember maybe like a formula, if you can't remember the answer to a question. There are multiple areas of a child or person's life that it can begin to affect.
Okay, so that's very good. This is a great answer. And I would just challenge you as you continue to press into this. So the things that you've stated in this paper and the things you're saying as we're talking directly from the paper, they're fairly big deals, right? I mean, skipping information, all that kind of stuff. But when you think to the implications of those things, it gets downright scary. Like, it's like you look to the future of the human race and you're like, oh no, this is gonna go very badly. Like, press into those spaces. Think critically to those implications, because when you are standing in front of parents or children defending this position, this paper's a little scary. The implications to this paper are very scary. And you're exactly right. That imagine a space where we stop remembering things and our brains literally lose the ability to remember, which research is showing is already happening now. You don't even calculate the tip that you give a waiter without pulling out your phone to calculate it on the phone. Our brains don't do any kinds of things anymore. Here's another question for you. So in that same vein of the skipping information, so you said our brains don't process information anymore, right? If our brain isn't processing, research is showing that the only time we as humans create new thought, new things, new ideas is when we process.
Mm-hmm.
So if we stop processing, what's an implication to that for children into adulthood?
That's another huge issue. Like you said, if we don't begin to process, we don't begin to start critically thinking, and it can lead to a whole other issue. People, things can happen where you don't process it because of the way your brain's rewired, and that can lead into many other things. We don't begin to process what's happening, we don't begin to process what we're reading, and that can mess up someone's job, it can mess up an education, and it can impact them throughout the rest of their life, whether it's a child, it's a teenager, or it's an adult.
Okay, great. One last question, and then I'll pass to Kevin. Parents introduce their children to technology at a very, very young age. We know that in our culture.
Yes.
Television, but really now smart devices at a very, very young age. In the grocery store, in the car, in the house. I mean, it's also everywhere, right? Because the smart device can go with you. What do you think is the primary reason that a parent hands their child a piece of technology that's gonna be interesting to them, when the parent might be thinking, I don't know that this is a good idea, but I'm going to do it anyway? What do you think the motive is for handing them that piece of technology?
That is a really good question. There's multiple reasons, but I think the number one thing is parents are very busy. It's not easy raising a child. I mean, my mom only has one, but I've seen parents and they're amazing. I don't know how they do it. But parents are busy, and I know that sometimes by handing a child a phone, it keeps the child busy. The child is not bothering you, the child is playing along and being happy. So I think that's one of the more, important things that I've seen, is that it's definitely just like, you're going to the grocery store, your child's whining or something, you just hand them the phone and they're happy.
There you go.
That's
there
one
you
of the things.
So would you say it's accurate to say to eliminate boredom?
Yes.
Because boredom leads to engagement that is uncomfortable.
I would 100% agree with that, yes.
Do you know what happens to the human being when we stop being bored? So you should do some research on that. It's extraordinary. The majority of our creative power takes place when we're bored. So if we eliminate boredom, we eliminate all ability for the human to create. That's another crazy reality. So why am I bringing all of this up to you and asking you about this? Because, like with the other two people that came up before you, this research is very helpful. But at the end of the day, when you're interacting with real people, you're dealing with emotions, right? Actually, oddly enough, very little of information changes us much until you can help that information become an emotional reality. I, as a parent, give something to my child because I don't want them to be bored, and I want them not to throw a temper tantrum. And then once I've given it to them enough and they're addicted to it, as you said, then when I take it away, what do? They throw a temper tantrum. What do I do? I get very afraid, and I just hand it back to them, and I'm like, grocery store, bad. Everyone's gonna think I'm a terrible parent, right? So whenever you're thinking about this stuff in terms of real application in real life, take yourself backwards and say, why is someone doing this? Why does a kid have technology? What's the motive behind that? Who's giving them that technology, and why? Because when you can speak to those things, you can tap into where the parent actually lives. The fears, the insecurities, the value system. People will think I'm a bad parent if my kid keeps misbehaving. No other kids misbehave in our society because they're all staring at a little screen. My kid should stare at a little screen too. And we don't even realize what we're doing. So, do you see what I'm saying? Tap back into those spaces and ask yourself always the higher question. Why does this matter? Because it does. You're doing a great job so far.
Thank you.
All right. So your paper is all about technology, but it's really about digital technology. Technology is just tools. And so there have been so many technological revolutions. That's really those are the mile markers in human history. So if we think back in that regard, and right now we're looking at the alarming effects of digital technology, but we think back to other technological revolutions, huge mile markers. So think even agricultural revolution. Because man creates some crude tools, now suddenly we're able to specialize. We can no longer, and this is theoretical, but we're no longer chasing food, we're growing food. Now there's a surplus, we can specialize further and all this stuff. And so then fast forward to a more recent technological revolution, the automobile. So someone introduces a vehicle that can self-powered take you, and how that revolutionized the world. That now we're no longer just marrying the girl that I grew up with across the street. But now, and so sociologists will actually say that was one of the primary reasons for the sexual revolution. That it opened up the idea of dating. And so we think of those things, we think so much of it has been positive. I mean, imagine our world if we didn't have automobiles.
Yeah.
Imagine if we were still chasing food. All these things. Good things, definitely some hard things, but how do we know that this technological revolution is different? That this isn't just like, oh, well, when electricity came about, we were scared because now we're thinking our kids now have lights and they can stay awake and they can do things much longer, and so they're seeing more, and so it's again a bombardment of their brain where it was limited in what they would be exposed to within a set day, but now it opened the door for all this. Or even print media, when you could now read a book and be introduced to so much more information than your just spoken oral tradition could give to somebody. So how do we know that this is different and this isn't just us saying, oh, it's different and we're scared of it? But what if this is just the next step and in 20 years we'll realize, oh, it's okay, and there's just something else? How do we know that this is actually going to be different?
I would say, like I said in my paper, the research, there's no particular reason to give your 2-month-old a phone because this is the next revolution. I'm not trying to like be rude or anything, because there is research that shows it does affect the brain, and if it does affect the brain, then how are we going to make any advances if all we're doing is continuing to stare at our screen? Given that we can create stuff on our screen, given that we can make stuff on the screens with iPads and tablets and computers, but if the child is getting so addicted to that, how is that going to help our world to advance even more than it is right now, instead of just, okay, well, this is, the technology era, and that's all it's ever going to be, is what I would say to that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's good. So I would just press a little further, and this will take a slightly different direction.
Okay.
I agree with you. So can you tell me how many official languages there are in India?
I do not know.
You do not know?
No.
Have you taken high school geography?
I have,
So
but
it's almost guaranteed that you were taught that at some point. How would you find that information?
I would go on the internet.
Do you have your phone with you?
It's back there.
So it's here. So you can get that information.
Yes.
So if you really needed to know in this moment how many official languages, there's 14 by the way, in India, you really need to, you just simply walk over there. So you could find it.
Yes.
So then what's the problem with our brain shifting from being a find stored information as opposed to now it's find the pathway to information?
So like I said before, yes, I see what you're saying there. Yes, we can Google it, but there are also books that we, read for history. When I was taught geography or when I was taught world history, I didn't get out my phone to search it up. I read my world history book. And it goes back to also kids aren't memorizing things, kids aren't processing, they aren't retaining, they're looking on their phone. Most of the time if you're out with friends, they're like, oh, I don't know this, oh, Google it. It's not, oh, I know that information because I read it in a book somewhere. It's all about technology now. So can you restate the question?
Okay, so let me phrase it like this in light of what you just said. If you're acknowledging that we can just simply find the information as needed, then why do we need to remember that?
We need to remember it because it's important. It's not just about finding information and just storing it. I did a speech a while ago about education and how it's changed now from where kids are just putting information in their minds and then they're putting it onto the test but they're not remembering it, and how is that going to affect them later in life when maybe they're asked about a world war or they're asked about the Civil War and they're like, I don't know, I can Google it, but they don't remember that information and things that impacted our country and our world.
That's good. The last part, the last line, the things that impacted. I think you've already said this, so I'm just encouraging you to go back to it, is you have to land on that. It's the higher level thinking that's required.
Okay.
Because the reality, we have things in our pockets that we can get all this information. So why is it important that we actually know and process as opposed to just have pathways to it? It's the intention or the implications, all the higher level thought. That's so crucial. So well done in that. Very good. My last question is, if we take this to a spiritual realm, how does this technological revolution, all these things, these dangers that we're seeing, all the research you've done, how do you see that affecting us spiritually?
Oh, okay, that's really good. I didn't do much research on that. I really kind of wanted to, but I just decided not to. Wow, that could can affect many things. I know that there's also the Bible app, but I can personally speak on this. I have a phone, obviously, and it's in the back. There have been times where I have been on my phone on Instagram and not reading the Bible. I've wanted to look at this and not look at the Bible, not maybe I miss a night of youth for something, and that's not helping me to develop my spiritual development. It says in the Bible that we're supposed to be a community, and if I'm just on my phone repeatedly and I'm not engaging with people because I'm so addicted to it, that's going to affect me in more ways than I can even imagine. So the slightest bit I can speak on that, I would say it would definitely affect a child not being in community and just being on their phone and just seeing the different things and not being connected and not just reading the Bible as it is, but trying to be on it on your phone. Does that kind of answer?
Yeah, that's really good. I love that you took it to community. I wasn't going to think that. That's great. One thing I would encourage you to consider, so taking all of your established research and the conclusions you've already drawn about processing versus skimming and all of that, and how we're losing the art ultimately of meditation, of deep contemplation, deep consideration. And the gospel tells us that God has actually come to us and revealed himself to us. And why? For his glory, to enjoy him, to be with him. And so if we see the ramifications of all this digital technology is that we're more connected and yet more isolated or alone than ever, and I think that you could probably very easily tie that to our spiritual relationship with God, that we're losing the art of deep meditation and just knowing the person as opposed to just skimming a bunch of information. So I would just encourage you to really think through that. I think that could be powerful. And I don't even know all the conclusions, so share them.
Thank you.
That could lead to some really cool stuff.
Okay, this has been great stuff. I think that one of the things that you have begun to touch on in a really big way in your research paper that I think you're just scratching the surface on in terms of where this movement is moving into is the idea that this has deep impact on our brain development and some of the impact that which we've discussed, and deep impact, as you've been sharing from a personal perspective, on our ability to be intimate with one another, to connect with each other. I think we are realizing more and more that people are more connected to information about each other than ever before, and less connected to each other than ever before, which from a spiritual perspective, we've often said, it's not about knowing more about God, it's about knowing God more. And that's true for us as humans as well. It's not about knowing more about you as much as knowing you more. And technology can become a great detriment to that. One of the things I would encourage you to do as you continue to press into this research, and I think all of us have equally encouraged you to continue to press into this because you are sitting on a topic that is waiting to really have its full implications, and I really would press into this, is really trying to divide the line between where technology is super helpful and where technology is super dangerous. Because that line, the more we clear that line up, the more we can give clarity to people on where they should use it and they shouldn't, so that we don't become like the witch hunters of old. Digital technology is evil for the brain and the humans, and we don't either become the ignorance of just do whatever, but we can really weave that line nicely of helpful, not helpful. And that will help you become even more clear on at what age a child, young adult, or adult should be introduced to what kind of digital media. Because that just gets determined by how it is or is not helpful, and you used a word really well several times, what responsibility comes with that. I think it is ironic that we're sitting in a room and you have lived in a generation where you made the assumption that a phone is a smartphone. And you say, what do you mean? You kept saying, well, when you get a phone, it's a lot of responsibility. Not when I got a phone, because all the phone could do was call. It had no other responsibility other than I could, and you said, the phone was for calling, but it was all this other stuff that was dangerous. I never lived in that world because I didn't get a smartphone until I was 30-something years old. So my parents kept it away from me until they actually developed it, and that was good. So we are living under some new rules and some new things we have to discover, and you've done a fantastic job beginning to tap into that.
Thank you.
There's a guy called Simon Sinek that I would encourage you to go watch on YouTube. There's another Advantage Technology. We got access to some stuff, but He does some great work on how the technology affects the teenager and the teenage brain. And it's very interesting to remember that the head of Apple, the head of Microsoft, the people that actually created those things, so you're now talking about Steve Jobs, and do you know what age they gave smartphones to their kids?
I don't remember the exact age, but I do.
High school.
have that.
Was it
Yeah.
before high school? Because they were like, that's crazy, this thing's so addictive, it'll kill them. So even the people that invented these things were like, I'm not having my kids touch this stuff until they're in high
Exactly.
school. So there's a lot of great research out there that will lay out for you the secrets of when it's appropriate to introduce which things. And I think that would enhance your next level of research on this. You've done a great job on this, and you did a great job presenting to us. You were very articulate and well thought through, and you're thinking very critically about this, and we're excited. So keep going. Love it.
Thank you so much.